Welcome to the 24th Annual Miami Jewish Film Festival, one of the world's largest and oldest Jewish cultural arts events. We want to thank all of our members, sponsors, community partners, volunteers, all of you film lovers, and especially our presenting sponsor, the Center for the Advancement of Jewish Education, SAGE, and the Greater Miami Jewish Federation for their continued support throughout all of these years. My name is Rabbi Rachel Greengrass of Temple Beth Am in Miami. I'm also the current president of the Rabbinical Association of Greater Miami, and I'm excited to be moderating a virtual conversation with the director, producer, and spiritual searcher of the film, Becky Tahel Bordo, Becky's production partner, Erin Marie Davis, and Becky's sister, Gal Andres, whose love sparked the film American Birthright, which is premiering at this year's festival. So thank you all for joining us. So Becky, looking back, why do you think you were struggling so much with your sister getting married to someone who wasn't Jewish?
This answer could go on forever. And I think there's like the shot, there's like the really simple, from a basic foundational level, I didn't have that answer for myself. It was a question that was always asked of me. And I think as a small people, as a marginalized group, that's a question that probably follows many others as well, right? There's not many of you. In marriage means there will be more of you. So then do you do that or not? And like that made sense to me, the question, but I resisted answering it for myself for a really long time. I mean, my sister and I were raised in Israel, but we really were spending most of our life in America. Right? We were born in Israel, but raised mostly in Philadelphia. So for us, it wasn't a question that was easy to answer. In Israel, you have Jews everywhere, but in Philadelphia, it wasn't as clear for us. So it was, again, something that was constantly there, and I just didn't have that answer. And then I think as I continued to mature, and then I moved to Los Angeles, and I searched and searched to find who I really was, that question came back with a vengeance. And not just because I hadn't answered it for so long, but because my sister had made a choice in her life that seemed to go against what our entire tradition said was right? Was like the way to preserve what we all love. So like, it was simple in one sense, like I didn't have an answer. It was a plaguing question. It's something that I feel like most Jews are probably asked, like, oh, that's a thing. Are you going to do that? But more than that, it also tugged at me in like a really deep spiritual way. And I'm a little fluffy like that. I feel like, yes, we live a spiritual life as well as a physical life. So like at a physical level, it was just something I faced. But at a spiritual level, I felt like a tug in my heart, like something didn't sit well with me, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me if it was because it was my sister's choice or because there was something that was begging of me to go and follow. So it was like a really interesting existential pull, and it was very layered. It wasn't just because I knew with certainty that what my sister was doing was wrong or right. It was so much more.
And I think when we'll get into some more questions about that, because I think that unfolds pretty nicely in the film. But since your sister is here, Gal, I have to ask you, and as I'm sure everyone who watched was asking, how did it feel for your love to be the subject of your sister's film and her existential quest?
So, I think that is a popular question, of course. And I think the initial response is like, was your sister upset? Like, did she feel judged? And to be honest, it was never that. So I'd say, when my sister first came to me with this idea, I took it more as like a flattering thing, to think that my life, my choices that I was certain and okay with really, sparked something in her, which I think was really special. So from the beginning, I was like, yes, do it. I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know what you're going to find, but do it. And, I think that also just speaks to how we grew up, just really supporting each other and trying to understand each other and, just really wanting my sister to kind of feel the like groundness, like the truth that I felt. And she just seemed to be so unsure of things. So if I can inspire her to, look into something like that, I thought it was incredible. So I've always been fully on board, as much as that seems surprising to some.
Well, I think you both have reflected just in this that um, on the surface it looks as if maybe Becky is being judgmental of Gul's choice, but in fact, and I do think you get to a point where you make it very clear that you were wondering what was happening inside of you, Becky, because you did see Gal and her relationship with Justin and how strong and beautiful that was, and you wondered what was going on inside of you in response to that, which sent you on a real spiritual journey. And so I want to talk a little bit about that journey. The journey took you all the way to Jerusalem, where you, and Erin is there right now, at least Zoom there. It took you all the way to Jerusalem, to the yeshiva. Can you tell us a little bit about your time at the yeshiva, what you were hoping to find there?
I mean, like my sister said, her and I we're so different in many ways. I think my sister was always really connected to who she was in her core, and I was not. I kind of just kind of fumbled around in my 20s and didn't quite have the direction that I felt like she did. She was in medical school and had dated the same guy for a really long time, and I was an actress and a producer and like kind of couldn't get my relationships together. So to me, finding a space and time that could take me out of the mess was really important. And I didn't go to seminary right away. And Erin can attest to that. We spent about 2.5 years asking a bunch of questions to everyone else. Like, my hope was that I didn't have to do some hard work. I didn't have to like take time away and go and study. And I really resisted it because I felt like I'd have to become religious, and it would be this whole, this is what you must look like. And if you come here, you must do A, B, C, and D. And it was very formulaic and oppressive, and I resisted it at all costs. We're also raised by a mother who was raised religious and was sort of like the rebel and raised us not religious at all. So I very much resisted going to Jerusalem to study anything. Like, take me to Haifa or Tel Aviv to have fun, sure. But to sit down and actually study and open up a book and learn about Torah was like not the sexiest thing at all. But after all of those years of asking a bunch of questions, I realized that, and you see that at the turn when I sit down with Erin and I'm like, oh my God, I've been doing this wrong. Maybe not wrong, but I've been taking us for 2.5 years down a path that's kind of exactly what my 20s was like. I'm bumping into stuff because I feel like there's something I'm not doing. And I think that's very reflective of life in general. Your path becomes clear when you make a really tough decision, whatever that is outside of your comfort zone. And I kept seeing that there, like, okay, maybe you need to study this thing. Maybe you need to figure out what Judaism actually means to you. Maybe you need to figure out why you're terrified of orthodoxy. Like, just sit with it. Just walk with the question and figure it out. And there was a lot of, like in Judaism, there's a thing of tikkun, like a correction. And I really resonated with that. I felt like I was making some sort of karmic correction. Maybe I just had to sit with the discomfort. Maybe I had to go back to Israel, not to party and have fun and see my family, but to sit in like the spiritual center of the world and learn about my wisdom tradition and be open to what that means and open to where that leads me and open to leaving Hollywood for 5 months and potentially not having a job when I get back or an apartment or a car, like all of that physical stuff. But like I said before, there was always my physical journey. And I felt like I wasn't paying enough attention to my spiritual journey. And that was what was really calling me. So as soon as I made that decision, and yes, there were voices in my ear, and there's one voice, and I just want to thank him because I don't thank him enough. His name is Michael Borkow. He's an established writer. He wrote like Friends and Malcolm in the Middle and like very well-known TV shows. But he took a meeting with me, and because he had seen the trailer that Erin had cut, and she did such a great job. We still use that trailer today. he was so moved by the movie, and I like had thought I'd made it. I walked into that room like, yeah, he sat with me and said, the movie could be great, but you're at a crossroads. And I felt like I was being punked, because he was so right. He said, it's at a crossroads and you can make a choice. You can be like Queen Esther, which we just came from Purim. So the Queen Esther story of like, do you stand up and do the thing for your people? I had no idea what he was talking about. Or do you like make a really fun movie and like maybe figure it out? And he like pushed me in the direction. We intellectually sparred for about an hour. And I walked out of that meeting very clear that I didn't know enough about Judaism. And that's what this movie was about. And I'd resisted that. So I had help from mentors and guides and awesome, talented, entertainment industry professionals. But at the end of the day, it wasn't an easy decision, but I think it completely changed like the trajectory, not just of the movie, but of my entire life.
Wow. We should all have mentors like that, people who will sit us down and say you're ignoring what's right in front of you. So I'm curious, you went all the way to living in Jerusalem, and as you said, leaving your community, your apartment, your things, your job, to go to Jerusalem and try on different practices. I loved the to-do list. I thought that was hilarious. So as a rabbi, I would wish this for everyone, but not everyone can do this. So what are your suggestions for other people who are watching this, who are saying, you know what, like, I also don't know as much as I would like. I also feel that inner hunger for something more, but they can't take off, 5 months to go study.
Look, most people can't take just 5 months and go and sit and learn. I mean, that's a dream, and I'm so blessed that I was able to do it. And if you can, I suggest you do that. But if you can't, I don't believe it's an excuse to not walk with questions. I think if there's a plaguing inquiry of some sort, like and that's been the whole thing for me, is walking with questions. Because as soon as you ask a question, like that's the vessel, and then suddenly you can get all sorts of wisdom. So you don't have to walk to Jerusalem with a question. You can be wherever you are and create an opening and a space for your question to be answered. I think the problem is not a geographical problem. I think it's most of the time is an intellectual and a spiritual and sort of an emotional fear that we don't want to ask the question. I don't even want to go there, because what happens if the answer I get is not what I want to hear? It begs me to change. It means that my life is potentially greater than I thought it could be, right? Like there's so many potential things that could come in when we ask a question, that I think the issue is not the 4 months or the 5 months or the traveling to Israel, or because there's so many trips to Israel to learn. There's all of that. Like 4 months, you could figure it out what to do with your car, and you could sublet your apartment. Like it's really not the logistical issue, I think. I think the bigger question is, are you willing to ask the big questions? And if you are, then fight for truth, no matter what. Like, don't find the way to do it. Do it part-time, do it 1 night a week, find a mentor and chat on a Sunday, for a couple hours. I think once you get the ball rolling of just asking the question and finding the next best person or resource to help you answer it, that's it. Like that's all you need. And maybe that leads you to a mini sabbatical somewhere, or maybe not. And I think, it took me a long time to answer that question. It was like 5 years and counting. But that was my journey. I think a lot of people, when they ask a question, they can get an immediate answer. The very next, like you never know when your answer could come right in. So don't let anything stop you. I think just ask the question, and I think the rest will unfold.
Thank you. I want to ask Erin a couple of questions. Just as Becky's production partner, I'm curious. The film looks like it's going to take one direction, and as she said, 2.5 years later, it's taking a completely different turn. So, what are you feeling during these twists and turns?
It was nonstop twists and turns. But that's the beauty and the frustration of the medium we were working in. Documentaries often don't have scripts. If you were lucky to have one, then it's likely your production schedule will be a lot more fluid than ours was. and because it was a really authentic journey, we just had to go with the flow. Like, we didn't know what the answers were when we started to do this. So, and every time we learned something, it took us in another direction, and it was exciting. It was challenging. It was difficult. It was rewarding. It was all of these things, the whole spectrum. And it was having all those twists and turns was the only reason we arrived at the final product we did, and the truth that Becky found at the end. So it was necessary. And it was like logistically challenging as well, because there were times when I couldn't be there. I couldn't be in the seminary with her for a couple months. I did go to Israel at one point. This is one of my photos from one of the last scenes that we shot in Israel. So yeah, logistically it was, we had different teams working on in different locations, but I think how it all came together was how it was meant to, and it's a beautiful story.
Thank you. I was curious about, you guys seem to not only be, production partners, but to be friends. And, what was your hope for Becky? I don't know if maybe you saw where it was going to go even before she did.
No, we were friends before we were production partners. So, and I know that can be tricky to work with someone you're friends with. And but yeah, I was on the journey with her in a lot of ways, learning and figuring all this stuff out. And my hope for her ultimately was just to find her truth. I mean, she kept saying that throughout the film, but it's truly what the journey was. And as her friend, that's all I wanted for her, was to find what resonated with her and what made sense, and to find peace with that. And ultimately she did, and she lives this beautiful life now with her husband and baby. And I couldn't be happier as a friend. And as a production partner on the business side, I also think it made for a really interesting film.
Let's not forget the years in post-production where I was shocked that Erin didn't completely just either kill me or herself. It was just so intense. I remember sitting in post the first few months there, like watching 150 hours of footage that we had, and like nearly losing our minds together. But it was also, I miss it. Like, that was the most fun I think I've ever had in post. I just have to say, I learned so much from Erin, because I never sat with an editor as much as I had with her. And I learned so much about being a better producer and director from her too, because I fumbled and messed up so much in the process. And though irritated, I'm sure, she would like kindly, sort of like pivot me and be like, okay, this is maybe the better way to do it. Or like, yeah. And she would, by the way, my favorite part is that Erin is not Jewish and did not grow up with any of this information. And that was the biggest win for me, is one, she now knows more than most of my family about Judaism, and it's awesome. And two, is that having her as a sounding board for that was amazing, because I didn't want this to feel like Bible camp. I didn't want the movie to be like some kiruv, we want to make you more religious of a movie, because that's not at all what it was about for me. And it was not what the journey was by any stretch of the imagination. So like having her there to say, yeah, I don't know, it was amazing. And I'm so, like I tell her all the time, I'm so blessed to have her as a friend. We're bridesmaids at each other's weddings, and we're aunties to each other's babies. Erin's pregnant and giving birth in a few weeks. So she's got a bump down there. So yeah, beyond like the magic of working together, we're family now too. We're really like spiritually connected as well.
Yeah, it's certainly easy to look back with rose-colored glasses, because the final product is so wonderful. But it was really different iterations of the film. We thought we were done so many times, and then there was another interview to do, another place to explore, another topic that we needed to get to the bottom of. So, but that's filmmaking, and it's wonderful and challenging in all those ways.
Well, we say, Erin, when someone's expecting in Judaism, we say B'sha'a Tovah. The baby may come at the proper time. That's very exciting news, and I love that that Becky used you as a sounding board, because Jewish people tend to have a lot of in-speak. And I grew up in the Midwest. You know, both of my parents grew up Orthodox, but I grew up in the Midwest. And when we moved to Jerusalem and then in New York, people had in speak, and I didn't know what they were talking about. I'd never been anything but Jewish. But I didn't know they were saying she's from. I was like, from where? I didn't know from was like another term for a woman to be Orthodox. I didn't know any of that. So I think that that was maybe having you there is why the film is so accessible when we get to different issues. Which is making me think of your to-do list. So you focused in the to-do list about a few different things. I have a couple of questions about your to-do list. So one is you focused in on SNEU, which is modesty, a way to dress modestly. So I'm seeing that you have a like a head choice right now. Maybe you could explain that to our viewers.
Totally. So a part of Modesty for me was really amazing and enjoyable. Like I was like, oh, because I'm an actress, right? So it's like there's wardrobe and there's specificity. And I felt like there was this beautiful sort of concealment in class that I didn't have as much access to in Hollywood. But then also it felt sort of like, why isn't somebody dictating what I need to wear and why I need to cover up specific parts of my body? And so of course that is explored, and there was so much that we had about it and so much that people shared with us that was really resonant. And I appreciated it. But then, you know, at the same time, it's like when I was in seminary, I felt like, and where I was in Har Nof, which is a very Orthodox area of Jerusalem, I felt like I couldn't even be wearing color and everything was covered. And that was not just a product of that neighborhood, which is wonderful. And that's a choice where you live in Israel based on neighborhoods. But it was also something I needed to find within myself. And so coming back to LA after trying on different things and being in different communities in Israel, from ultra Orthodox to not Orthodox at all, and finding the flavor, I had to really reevaluate my own wardrobe. I had to like Marie Kondo my entire wardrobe, not just from a modesty standpoint, but from like do I connect to this as much? And I don't think that's just a religious plight. I think we probably do that generally as we mature. And I was like thinking to myself, like, how do I want to dress as a mother and as a wife? Like, would I be wearing the same stuff? And it was personal, it was me. It wasn't like I would never judge anybody else, but it was just something I was really struggling with. And the head covering to me was always really interesting. I'd learned about it before, about this sort of like energy around the crown and like this whole thing. And I was like, found it really interesting and mystical. But you know, in my family growing up, like my mom's Moroccan side my grandmother covered her hair, and a lot of my family covers their hair. So to me, that looked sort of not like it connected me to my roots, and I really liked it. So when I got married, I remember not really talking to my husband about whether I'd cover my hair or not, and not being really sure if I would, because that felt like such a big, like, choice. It's big, and a lot of people wear wigs as a part of modesty, where you don't, you know, your hair is a very sensitive and sensual part of who you are, and it is reserved for a more intimate relationship with your husband and your family, as opposed to for everyone. And as you can see, like, this is my hair, but I cover the top part of my hair. I'll wear hats, I'll wear other things, just to cover what I connect to as being like the most energetically sensitive part of my head. I don't know if that sounds too woo-woo and out there. I'm sure there's more grounded ways to explain, or people like, it's just what we do. But to me, like, you know, when you don't listen to rap music for years and then you listen to it and you're like super sensitive to all the cursing, I think that's just like what happened to me after a little while. That like I had been in this environment, and the community that I'm around and all the learning that I had done had explained to me the sensitivity around hair. And while I didn't, you know, decide to wear a wig for many different reasons, and I don't cover all of my hair for other reasons, I felt like my shade of gray, or like my lane in the halachic highway, or like, to me, what I felt was right was this. And it's colorful and it feels reflective of who I am, and it's fun, and I'm in process always on it and in it. You know, will I cover my hair more? I don't know. Will I cover my hair less? Who knows? It's kind of like in this moment. And since I got married, that first day, I didn't want to leave the house like just with no hair covering. It just like felt right to me, and really spoke to me. So that's the hair cover piece. And I got like cute little matching turbans with my 4-month-old. So that's kind of fun too, that we get to like play together and make it fun. And it's fashionable now. Like back in the day, it was super, super like religious-y. And now it's like, you just see a lot of the non-Western world has hair wrapping traditions. So it's really cool to see that and connect to my, North African roots and my Jewish roots in that sort of way that feels me.
I love that. Oh, thank you. I was going to say it is very fashionable.
Yes.
So, Gal, maybe you can give us an inside scoop on the family and the family's reaction. I'm curious both to your own marriage and to Becky's journey and her kind of dip into a more spiritual side of Judaism than the family of origin.
So, great question. It's a loaded question. Initially when me and Justin first met, the family was incredibly excited. They wanted me to be in a loving, lasting relationship. But then, as things got more serious, I could sense a bit of tension, more with my mother, less with my father. My father is, for lack of a better term, like very Americanized, very open, just wanted me to be happy. So for him, it was really a non-issue. It was like, oh, you found a good guy, he's sticking by you, you love him, great. With my mom, there was this question of, well, is he going to convert to Judaism? Like, what are you guys doing? What are you even thinking about? And, it's not stuff that me and him didn't speak about. So it's not like, oh, I have no clue. And it did take some time to explain to my mom that, no, he's not going to convert, because that's a huge deal. And, if he felt in his soul, I am a Jew, I want to convert, I would welcome it. I don't know that is him. Things can change. I'm not closed off to anything. That's never really been his soul. So I wouldn't want to push something that's inauthentic. But then at the same time, now we've been together for 13 years. We've spoken a lot about our values, our principles, what we care about, what our house should look like, how we want to raise our kids. And those things never really conflicted. So it took time to show that to my mom and explain that to my mom. And I think time was really helpful, of like, it's been this many years and we're still believe the same things, feeling good together, have a good life plan that she was okay with. So, and it also, it came to a point where I sat her down like, Mom, this is the deal. This is how I feel. This is not going to change. So it's kind of like, take it or leave it, but don't leave it because I need you in my life. And she was just like, wow, okay, yeah, like, of course I'm going to be in your life. So then past that point, it was more open and understanding. And I mean, now Justin is our family. So it's really a non-issue. We've been to Israel together, and my Israeli family there loves him. He eats all of their food, which is like, if you don't do that, you're kicked out. And he is just like eating and eating. And my aunts were like, who is this guy? He's okay. So it was interesting. It was good. And then, from my sister's journey, I'd say there was a little tension too, because like she said, we were not raised in a religious way. So it was so interesting to see that I'm on this side, she's on this side. Our parents are somewhere in the middle, just like trying to grapple with, what is okay? What can we be okay with? And I know that, when my sister first got engaged, like my dad called me and was like, so like, she's a religious Jew now? And I'm like, well, Dad, if she's happy and this is her truth, then good. And he was like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah. So our parents always needed some guidance and like understanding, but thankfully, like in their core, they love us and they want us to be happy and they are understanding. They just need a little explanation of like, it's still me. Like, sure, I observe Shabbat, but like, still your daughter, still, still going to do all these things. Like, it's not like this huge change. You're never going to see me. So I think explaining that and then them just like seeing and feeling our happiness makes them completely okay, which is really a blessing. I think we're really blessed to have a family that maybe needs some pushing and some urging, but in the end of the day, like gets there and and stays there.
And that's so helpful. I think no matter who we fall in love with, there's fear whenever a child is getting married that you're losing them in some way.
Hmm.
And I think you're both like such a great example of um, following your heart and still, being able to stay grounded in your family. Um, okay. So you're making me think about some of the questions in the film. So I'm going to ask Becky first, but then Gal, I'm going to ask you a similar thing because throughout the film, Becky's interviewing phenomenal teachers. But there are certain rabbis who have very firm and sometimes polar opposite reactions to this idea of you, Gal, marrying out. Some said that you basically were lost to our people. And then on the other extreme, there was this question of, are you really marrying out at all? Since you and Justin do, as you say, have so many of the same values and beliefs. So Becky, I'm wondering as a sister, who starts with this question and is trying to check her own gut, like what your reactions were when you heard these responses to your sister. And obviously they don't know your sister, they don't know Justin, so they were judging just based on it being an interfaith marriage.
And that's important, I think, to note too, because it is so layered. When you say interfaith, it's like, in Judaism, you have to take into consideration, so which is the Jewish partner? Because halakhically, people say, oh, it's not an issue. She's Jewish, so the kids will be Jewish. We're not losing anyone. And to me, it was like, it's not about losing or not. It's deeper than that. It's just about connection and relating. And why we think it's so important to have a Jew and a Jew relating in marriage in general. Like, find the continuity and find the children, but beyond that. So I always had a little bit of I was always like on my sister's side and not on my sister's side all at once. It was the weirdest thing. And I think in the questioning where I was like, was I trying to break up my sister's wedding? Like as much as I was on her side, truly like always sort of like, no, but my sister is different and she's so thought out and she's like always been really spiritual and advanced and like I call her my big sister, though I'm older. Like I really always trusted my sister. Always, always, always. I never felt like she could make mistakes, believe it or not. And so when they would say, oh, it's like, jumping into the road with cars, right? Or like something like that, where it's like, she's lost, she's basically dead. And I was like, no, she's not. And not us, like not my sister, not our family, because we're going to find a way to make this the coolest situation. And we hold great space for each other despite being different. We always have. So in one sense, when I would hear things that told me you've lost your sister, like it would tug at fear. And I knew that that's not where I wanted to function from. So I'd say, no, not that, like not that. And that became a thing for me is in learning anything, not everyone's your rabbi, not everyone's your teacher. So just because someone says, yep, they don't mix oil and water, that doesn't, and then you hear my sister say, well, you can emulsify them like salad dressing. And it's like, yes, and so I felt like I would yes and constantly. I'd hear something that didn't work for me necessarily or didn't feel really integrated yet, and I would say, interesting, okay, let me take that, let me walk with it, let me be open enough, but I'm not just gonna let you tell me how I feel. And I think that's really important, and just in general with this sort of journey, especially a spiritual journey, because I think it's such a fragile one, that you don't take everything you hear. And then later on, when I would hear things like at a soul level, and that was something that I really wanted someone to tell me, like at a soul level, is there a difference between a Jewish soul and a non-Jewish soul? And that's a whole other thing, right? But like, even when I was told this whole reality of, yes, souls can have different karmic paths and all of that, right? And it got so layered, and I still felt like, well, maybe there's something we're not seeing about them at a soul level. Who can give me the DNA of their soul? So to me, I was always kind of holding out hope for my sister to just be okay. Like, I think it just was a very protective thing for me. And then also at the same time, realizing that it wasn't really about her. So I didn't have to be so defensive all the time when people would say, oh, bummer, and I would hate that. Like, my sister married a non-Jew, oh, bummer. And it's like, well, now hold on. Like, yes, in a sense, I understand why that's a bummer, but it's layered. Like, let's have a bigger conversation around this thing. Let's not just automatically check off the box that, oh, she's married out, she doesn't get it. Like, what if there's something bigger going on? And that's still a conversation I'm in. And I find myself in that conversation often because it's so dynamic, and it's, there's so much there, and that's a whole other conversation. But I think what became most important for me, and what I think is really the takeaway of a film like this, that I had to make a choice for myself at the end. And I was really, really afraid to do it, because I felt like if I said, to me, it's important to marry a Jew, I think at a soul level for me, and at a physical level for me, it is absolutely optimal, that then my sister would, one, take that as a huge attack on her decision. Like, you must be wrong for me to be right, which is not the case, right? We can exist in a sort of dynamic conversation still and relate to each other despite me making my own decision that's different than hers. And I can continue to have the same conversation with other people. So it's very complex. It's very complex. And I'm still very defensive of my sister's relationship. Though I do now understand more of why people have that reaction. And I think there is a sensitivity that I have, that I don't just go, well, you don't know Gal and Justin. It's a little softer. It's a little more understanding and compassionate, because we are small people. There's 14, maybe 15 million of us in the world. We have been oppressed. There's a lot of anxiety and fear that we carry at a DNA level. So it's not just saying, you don't get it. It's saying, I see the fear. I honor the fear. I honor the anxiety. I know where it comes from. I know where mine came and comes from. And I know why I make the decision that I make. But I think what's most important before we write people off and judge people, no one ever connected to Judaism or anything by being judged. So the most important piece, I think, here is just to follow the thing that my sister and I are continuing to work on doing, is to love each other despite our differences, to hold space for a dynamic conversation despite disagreeing on some fundamental things. Like, that's family, that's Judaism, that's like Shammai and Hillel. Like, that's the idea of, like, healthy disagreements are supposed to be for the sake of truth, not for the sake of right. And if I wanted to be right, I would never have continued the documentary past, year one. I would have just been like, well, this is feeling like it's really attacking my ego. Let's call it a day. But I wanted this to be more. And I think that's going to be a lifelong pursuit. And I'm glad that I have a partner like my sister in this life to, like, grapple. And it's not just interfaith. It's everything me and her talk about. And Erin too. Like, that's how I relate to people now. And I'm not afraid of the friction. I'm not afraid of the sort of mining the answers together by sort of, it's like, making a diamond. It's not simple. And you have to rub against the tough parts to get to that shine. And that was the biggest takeaway for me, that though I was butthurt by a lot of the things that were said, it was all about truth. And I found it at the end for me.
Thank you, Becky. Gal, I have to ask you, watching this and hearing the rabbis, I loved your response with the emulsification. I mean, brilliant. But how was it hearing these kinds of things?
So, obviously it's not the most fun to be just truthful, but also I understand, I get it. I definitely pride myself on being someone who's tolerant and understanding of most people. Now I'm a doctor, I'm a psychiatrist. So that's also, part of my job to create space for people to let their stories unfold. So I can't be upset or have hatred towards people who feel differently than me, and in fact, if someone feels so strongly about something, they should speak out about it. Who am I to say, no, you're wrong, look at my life, it can't be right. And like my sister said, that there's space in this world for both things to be true and to be okay. So, definitely hearing some of those things can be a little upsetting, but also I know that those people are speaking to their truths, and in their world and their mind and everything that they know, marrying a non-Jew could never happen. That's just no way, no chance. And in my world, that's just not what the truth is. Also in the sense that, you know, I don't feel like I'm lost. I don't feel like, wow, my kids won't be Jewish, because I am a Jew. I will always be. I have a Jewish soul. I have a Jewish home. I have traditions. I have things that I love, things that I cannot wait to share with my family. So I'm not really one to subscribe to fear of, oh no, I did this, the future of Jews are going to be ruined. No, because I know that I am a Jew and I know what's important to me. So I kind of get both sides. I want to be a tolerant and understanding person, but I also have to live my truth.
Thank you.
Of course.
So Erin, as this production partner / friend, and as the non-Jew on the call, I have to wonder, like, how this question strikes you as an outsider.
It's a great question. Personally, I think that you should marry who you love. But I never really gave it any other thought beside that. This whole process really shed light on how it can be more complex than just that. And one thing I love about the film that made it challenging, I keep talking about it being challenging, but was all the different opinions. And I was behind the camera on the majority of the interviews, and it was just fascinating to hear all the different points of view that there are on this issue and all the different reasonings, and resonating with some and maybe not with others, but kind of understanding on a deeper level where these ideas and fears and where all this comes from. And it was just a wonderful education for me. And I know that there's like the Grenada rabbi, for example, wasn't the most popular when we were getting feedback for the film. Some people were like, we don't need that opinion, get rid of him altogether. That's, too old school, or too this, too that. And I fought for him to be in. I felt like, we need to see all the different opinions on this matter, because this is also like to create an authentic experience like Becky went through. She was getting all of this feedback. So, and she had to sift through all of it to come to her truth. So, and hopefully that's what the viewers can do as well, is they can hear all the different spectrum of opinions and then be able to figure out what makes sense for them.
So I want to talk about all of these rabbis and teachers that you went to, because probably your average viewer probably doesn't know who a lot of these people are, but as a rabbi, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you got to speak to like all of these people. So I'm just curious, what are some of your favorite, pieces of wisdom that you took from those experiences?
Making a movie is basically taking your favorite sound bites and your favorite wisdom and putting it in a movie together on a timeline and like sending it out. So like the movie, but there's something that's not in the movie that I think is so important. And I kind of, not to come from fear that when people watch this, it's like with a child. Like, yes, I want my child to be inspired to learn, but then I'm also like terrified that they're going to go to the wrong teachers. So when I say wrong teachers, is like, I found really compassionate teachers and people that held space for me, like I said before, in finding something that could really be integrated. And I think integration is really important when you're learning anything, but especially something spiritual. And when my sister was saying before that, like my dad and my mom, they had their fears, but I think as they saw me and how I presented, like how I felt and how they felt around me and how I functioned, they were like, oh no, you're pretty coherent, right? Like you're together, you're integrated. And I think that is an important thing to not just like, it it would feel wrong of me to not mention that, because I think there can really glorify a spiritual quest. But it is a lot of work, and it is potentially very fragile, and I don't want to say dangerous because again, it's coming from fear, but like we have to really keep our head on right. Especially when we're fragile and spiritually seeking, like there's a lot of people that can say stuff and we're just like, yeah, that, and you don't know what you've just allowed into your precious mind. So super blessed to have the rabbis that I had, and they really were very wonderful and balanced and allowed me to find my own letter in the Torah. And I think that's my favorite teaching, is that like we are all a letter in the Torah, that the Jewish nation has a letter, and that my letter is not my sister's letter, is not your letter, Rabbi. And that's the perfect part about that, is that I don't need to be the same letter. And I thought I was finding this like one letter that we're all trying to be. And that was where I was going wrong, is that I was wanting to be told, like I was always sort of envious of my sister, that she knew she wanted to be a doctor since she was 5. And she had this path laid out for her. You go to medical school, you have a residency, you pick your specialty. And I was just like, how nice to have this ways through life. And not that it's that easy. And I'm sorry to like, reduce it to that. But to me, as like a filmmaker and a creative, it's just, again, bumping into a lot of things and re-navigating. It's like constant re-navigating. So I think to be able to have that sort of inner compass, and to make sure that you're integrated, and to make sure that the people around you feel like you're rabbis. And my sister was my rabbi at times, and Erin was my rabbi at times. And I think to learn, again, like who is a smart person and one that learns from everyone, is something my mom would tell us all the time. Like it's something that was passed on by our sages, but it's something that is so relevant, is just learn from people who speak to you. And not everything that everyone says is Torah, and not everything is right for you. And that was my shade of Jew. And be that, and that it doesn't have to look like everybody else. And I had a struggle. I remember sitting on the couch before I went, I had the like Zoom, that was my little Sony, and I was doing the blog style, where I was like, there's so many ways to be Jewish, and that trips me up. And it did, because how do you tell somebody, yes, come, this tradition is wonderful, and then there's like a billion ways to do it. I thought this was going to give me a path. I thought it was going to give me my trajectory like my sister had. And it didn't. It opened up a whole bunch of new questions, which is in and of itself the answer, is like, there will be more questions. Ask the questions, continue to learn. And yes, at some point, live your life. My mom is still on me for that. Well, I hope you're not asking more and more and more questions. Aren't you going to live? Didn't you find answers? And my answer to her, and to anyone that's just like, well, there's another spiritual seeker constantly asking questions, when will she just live? Is that I do believe you arrive, and then something else happens, and you ask more questions, and then you arrive, and then something else happens. I have a child, now I have more questions, and then they're answered, and then something else happens, and I have more. And that's the journey of our soul in this, in this world, figuring it out and having a blast, and hopefully making more documentaries that answer more big questions.
Thank you. And wonderful Pirkei Avot quote there. I think that I hear that sometimes with people who are searching in Judaism, that they just want to be told what to do and here are the rules. And for some people, going to the Orthodox community provides that for them. The more Orthodox, the more rigid, the easier for people who thrive in that kind of an environment. I also love how you are portraying how this is actually complex, and you don't have to be all the way at a 10 in any of your to-do lists to really be like living a meaningful, and how your expression of Judaism, while recognizably maybe a little more observant than your sister's expression of Judaism, they are both valid expressions of Judaism. And while it's a visible thing, but it's not necessarily like a heart or kishkas thing. I'm like kishkas, your gut. Okay.
So word too. She uses that word a lot, right? You got to feel it.
Yeah. So I want to ask just a couple silly questions, Becky. Like, why Becky?
it's such, I always think to myself, like, I could have literally chosen any name. Why Becky? And there was a girl that I was friends with in 3rd grade. I was going into 4th grade, and she wasn't going to be at that school. And her name is Becky Slovak. If Becky's out there, Rebecca Slovak. You inspired me to take a name. She was just like cool. She wasn't too popular and snooty, and she wasn't like a nerd. She was just like middle of the road, cool chick. And I was like, Becky feels like that name, and that's who I want to be. So I'm just going to take that. And my mom, it wasn't a middle name that I'd use, but my mom was like, your middle name is bracha, is a blessing. So I was like, Becky. I mean, it kind of works. It's a B and a B. That was my like 3rd grade, 4th grade logic at the time.
No, I'm glad you explained. Another question I have to ask, given your history, did you meet your husband on JDate?
Oh my God, wouldn't that just be like the best? And maybe not, who knows? No, we didn't meet on JDate. We met in the flesh, which feels like such a foreign thing now during COVID. But yeah, we met in person. We met through friends. And it's funny, I was like joking with him earlier that I don't think I would have considered him a viable option if I hadn't gone on this journey. Like, there are many things that we have in common, and he also has like Moroccan parents, born in Israel, raised here. A lot of the like half-halfness, which is cool because we can speak Hebrew, but we're more Americanized. There's a lot of stuff. He's creative, but he is also observant, like keeps Shabbat, keeps kosher, but is super colorful and in the world. But I don't think that would have worked for me. Like, I probably would have met him and been like, oh, he's cute and like talented, but he like does those things, and that feels like not who I am. But it was who I became. So when I met him, it was just like, wow, you're totally presenting as I do. Like, we're kind of the same brand. This is awesome. And it was like an instant knowing. And yeah, it like kind of the rest was history. I remember immediately like rolling down my Megillah of the things that I knew I needed, which was also very different for me. At the end, when you had the shadchanit, the matchmaker, going like, when you go like this, it's very easy to find what you want. And I wasn't going like this. I didn't have a list of the things that felt right. I was like, like whatever. But I came back from Jerusalem with like, here's a list, and I'm flexible, but I know that these things are really important to me. And so I like had that list, and we checked them all off, and he didn't think I was a weirdo. In fact, he was like really pleased that I knew what I wanted, and that was that.
It's really great. And your sister mentioned you have a baby. How old is? Tell us about your baby.
She is 4 months old, Aria Tara. She is fabulous. She's just such a mellow, lovely soul. She's funny and just so curious. And it's the past year. I mean, we got married last January, and then I found out I was pregnant a few weeks after. And then, the entire year was pregnancy and quarantine, and I gave birth in October. It was really miraculous. It's a lot, and I know I talked to Erin about it. The last few months have just been a re-identification with myself, and to find that new sense of who I am as a mother, and to integration, like taking all that in and wondering, like, what do I teach her about these things, and who do I want to be in that sense? And she's my new rabbi. She teaches me so much as well, and it's really, really, really special. It's a special thing. She loves her Doda Gal, and she loves her auntie Erin, who already sends her awesome clothing, and we're all sort of continuing to build this, next generation, which feels really meaningful to me. She's wonderful. She's wonderful, and I feel like the 4th month, after the first 3 of just like what is going on, is really starting to feel like we've cemented a relationship, and we're living life together, as opposed to just grasping for how to be together in the world. Now it's like, we've arrived. This makes sense.
Wonderful. So I know we only have a few minutes left. I'm just curious, do you keep a to-do list now?
Such a beautiful question. And I don't have as much, my to-do list isn't as long anymore. But I do walk with questions. And so the list is 1 or 2 things that I'm still wondering, that I'm curious about. And I Skype and Zoom with rabbis in Israel, ones that I met on my trip, on my journey. And I think that to me has been such a gift. Life gets busy, And the burning questions sometimes, get put on the back burner as other things are hotter in the moment. But it's definitely something that on Shabbat, which I'm more grateful for Shabbat than ever, having a child and a business that my husband and I run, it's just been nonstop. So like turning off and being together, all those questions come up again, and then I walk with them each week. So whether I talk to my husband about it, or I, chat with friends, or I chat with my teachers and mentors, or it's just something that I chat with the creator about, like, hey, this is an intention. I have a question about this. Show me. I usually get answers, weeks, months, whenever the time is right, but certainly walking with many different questions about where am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to be doing? Right? Like this project was a baby and it's birthed. Now what? I've been carrying this baby for 6.5 years. What do I do now? It's like, I check that off the list, and I've learned so much about these things. Like, yeah, I will continue to refine each of those, headers or subjects and maybe flow within them. But what now? Where am I served beyond this? How can I continue to be of service? And where am I growing? Where else am I growing? And I think that's going to be a forever thing.
Thank you so much. Your film, besides delving into big questions in the Jewish community, such as, how do we accept, not accept, embrace, live with, interfaith? How do we find meaning in a world that is very busy and full of distraction? I think that you've also taught us that often when we have a question that seems outside of ourselves, that it really stems from something that we are searching for within. So thank you so much to Becky Tahel Bordo, Erin Marie Davis, and the amazing sister, Gala Andres, for joining us. Once again, thank you to all of our members, sponsors, community partners, volunteers, all of you film lovers, and especially our presenting sponsors, the Center for Advancement in Jewish Education, SAGE, and the Greater Miami Jewish Federation for their continued support throughout all of these years. And thank you, our audience, for participating in the 24th annual Miami Jewish Film Festival.